The sorcerers of Jujutsu Kaisen are generally considered pretty strong, but how do they compare to Makima, a powerful, nigh unkillable devil from Chainsaw Man? Will any be able to take her down, or will they all come up short? Let's find out. Before we cover the sorcerers, I want to briefly go over Makima's abilities so we're all on the same page. Makima is the control devil, meaning she is the embodiment of the fear of control, conquest, and domination. Her main ability that all of her other abilities stem from is her ability to fully control beings that she believes are less than her. This control can happen automatically if the difference in strength between the two is wide enough. And once a being is under her control, it is almost impossible for them to break free, as we only ever saw one devil get out, and even that rebellion only lasted for a few seconds. This gives Makima access to a ton of powerful abilities, like the Angel Devil's ability to create powerful and unique weapons, the ability to see slightly into the future via Aki's Future Devil, the ability to control a horde of zombies via the Zombie Devil, complete control over all the known weapon hybrids except Chainsaw, and many more that we will cover when they come up in the video. The most important contract Makima has, though, actually comes from a human. It's her contract with the Prime Minister of Japan, which forces any injuries or damages she sustains to be redistributed across the nation's population in equivalent injuries and accidents. This basically means she cannot die, and even if she does, she will come back to life anyway in every case except one. This means there are realistically very few sorcerers that could actually beat her. In fact, it is implied by Kishibe that even if her body was fully destroyed, Makima might still return, so she really cannot die. The last notable supernatural ability Makima has is Bang, which allows her to do massive damage to a target with an invisible force. In addition to all these abilities, Makima is also extremely intelligent and is an expert in hand-to-hand combat as well, so she's a very well-rounded fighter overall. Oh, and she can also control small animals and borrow their senses. Okay, now we can get into some sorcerers. I've divided Jujutsu Kaisen's sorcerers into 5 groups depending on how I think they would do against Makima. The first tier is the Fodder sorcerers. These are the sorcerers that I think Makima could beat simply by looking at them. As we just covered, her abilities to control people she thinks she's stronger than, and in cases where this belief is strong enough, it is all that she requires to take control. Everyone in this tier are people that I think Makima would believe she's stronger than just by sizing them up, therefore giving her an instant win over them. Some of the sorcerers that are in this tier are Junpei, Mai, Kirara, Remy, Ui, and every other sorcerer we do not mention later in the video. There's like 20 of them, and I do not want to spend a minute listing them all. None of them really have a chance against Makima at all. So let's move on to some sorcerers who might be able to put up a modicum of a fight. These are the low diff sorcerers, which I have defined as sorcerers Makima needs to defeat in order to control, but she can do so without any of her abilities aside from her healing. Basically, she can put them in the dirt with her bare hands and then incapacitate them. There are actually a number of notable sorcerers in this tier, so I do want to spend some time here. Let's start with Inumaki. It might be surprising to hear that Inumaki is in this tier, but to me, the reason is clear. Inumaki experiences backlash from his vocal attacks, and it gets stronger the stronger his target is, and also gets stronger when he uses stronger words. Makima is quite a bit stronger than Inumaki, so any words he uses against her would likely do a lot of damage to him as well. And even if it does do some damage to her, she can just heal back to normal like it's nothing. Not even the death command would actually kill Makima, as we have seen her die and come back to life a couple of times throughout the series. So considering he has no way to damage Makima, and he would be constantly sustaining damage as he fights, I think he would lose pretty quickly. Another notable sorcerer in this tier is Meimei. Meimei is a fierce fighter, which is what's keeping her out of the bottom tier. The issue is, just like Inumaki, she doesn't actually have a way to damage Makima. Yes, Bird Strike is a strong attack, but we have to remember that death isn't permanent for Makima. A Bird Strike just adds one more to the counter, and that's assuming she doesn't dodge it like the top tier of sorcerers can. This matchup could become even more lopsided if Makima's control of animals overrides Meimei's curse technique, which I think it probably would, since Makima is considerably stronger than Meimei, and because of the nature of the control. There's really no way to know, but even with the birds, I don't think Meimei would pose a serious threat to the control devil. This next one might surprise you. It's Todo. Look, I love Todo, but his ability is just really not that good for this fight. We're assuming all these fights are 1v1s, so Boogie Woogie would have limited usage here, as his options to trade spots with would be lowered. That doesn't mean it would be completely useless, but the less items Todo has to swap with, the less of an advantage he can gain. I also think sorcerers who primarily fist fight are at a bit of a disadvantage against Makima as well, as she is extremely competent at hand-to-hand combat. All Makima has to do to win is figure out how how Boogie Woogie works and then start predicting Toto's moves. That's obviously not as easy as it sounds, and it's even less easy when we take into account the Vibrous Slap, but I do think it is a task Makima could pull off without using any of her other abilities. Next in low tier is Kamo. Kamo is not a strong sorcerer, nor is he a strong blood manipulation user. He is inhibited by having to use his own blood and having a limited amount of said blood, but that blood does provide his biggest advantage. At the end of Chainsaw Man Part 1, Makima is ultimately defeated after Denji cuts her with a chainsaw made of Power's blood. That blood then runs rampant within her body, slowing down her healing. If Kamo is able to get his blood in Makima's body and then control it, something similar could happen. This doesn't mean I think he would win like Denji, because Denji also won thanks to his love for Makima, which Kamo probably wouldn't have, but he could actually weaken her a bit, which is just enough to get him out of the bottom tier. If and when Makima fights back though, he probably just loses. Even with Flowing Red Scale, I do not think he'd be able to keep up with her. Next is Kashimo. Yeah, sorry Kashimo fans, but I don't think he stands much of a chance against Makima. There's a 99% chance he doesn't use his technique on Makima, but even if he does, all Makima has to do to survive is wait until it concludes, because that kills him. And this is something she can definitely do thanks to her regenerative powers. It is unfortunately just that simple. Another easy one would be Hazanoke. As a sorcerer, Hazanoke is self-assured and fairly strong, which is why he's in this tier despite posing no real threat to Makima. Really, all she has to do is stop him from using reverse curse technique, either by running him out of cursed energy or by decapitating him, and I don't think she would really have too much of an issue doing either of those things. She also wouldn't have too much of an issue against Nanami. The only reason Nanami is in this tier and not the bottom tier is his pure aura. I do not think he is someone Makima could look at and think, yeah, I could beat him, so he's in this tier. Once the actual fighting starts though, Makima will take an advantage pretty quickly and Nanami won't last much longer. Now we can get into the moderately difficult sorcerers. These are the ones Makima would actually have to start trying against. Not trying hard, but trying in some capacity. This mid tier is defined as a tier where Makima would choose to use her abilities in some capacity in order to secure a win. This doesn't mean she's in much danger of losing, but there are some sorcerers here that could be a bit of an issue, like our first one, Megumi. Let's get the elephant out of the room. Mahoraga is not included here. Megumi never gains control of Mahoraga. He only ever uses it as a last resort to try and take his opponent down with him if he thinks he's gonna die. If Megumi did summon Mahoraga, who might not even be able to defeat Makima, he would die. And unlike Makima, who can die millions of times and still come back, Megumi cannot. So him dying means Makima winning, and as such, we're not taking Mahoraga into account for Megumi. That being said, Megumi is still a bit of a challenge on his own. The 10 Shadows technique in general is extremely versatile and very powerful, meaning Makima would likely need to use her own contracts to counter the Shikigami. The Zombie Devil, Angel Devil, and Bang would probably be enough. Zombie would be used to overwhelm the Shikigami, the Angel Devil would be used to create a strong weapon to kill the Shikigami, and Bang would be used for Megumi himself. Using these three abilities, Makima should be able to win in a battle of attrition, slowly whittling down Megumi's offensive options until he's out of gas. The only thing that could potentially put a wrench in this plan is Megumi's domain, but I don't think that would be much of an issue here either. Megumi needs to be in an enclosed area in order to activate his domain, so there's no guarantee he will be able to open it in the first place depending on the environment they fight in. Even if he does get it open, that doesn't mean he's gonna do well. A domain expansion collapses after the user sustains too much damage, so if the two are fighting all out in the domain, Makima should be able to outmatch him and force the Shadow Garden to wilt. Another notable character in this tier is Toji/Maki. They're equivalent in strength and abilities, so I'm just going to talk about them both at the same time. The issue with these two is that their physical strength doesn't really give them an advantage against Makima. We know they can hit really hard and heal decently too, but that doesn't really matter here, because they both just got eviscerated by Bang, as we saw it completely destroy the middle section of power. This injury is not dissimilar to the one that killed Toji, and as great as their healing is, I don't think it's good enough to regrow an entire torso. Next, we have a trio of Culling Games characters that I want to get out of the way before we continue with some more major characters. Reggie, Uro, and Ryu are the three we're going to be talking about right now. Individually, they are all strong sorcerers, but they come up short when compared to Makima. Reggie has good versatility, which could force Makima to use at least one ability, but he's arrogant and his contract recreation has limitations based on on what he's bought. Once Makima figures out how this ability works, she just needs to separate the contracts from Reggie, since he needs to hold a contract in order to activate it, and without them, he's going to be pretty useless. Uro would pose slightly more of a problem with her technique thanks to its reality-bending effects, which could affect Makima's attacks as well. The issue here though is Uro really lacks in defense, as Kuroushi was able to sever her arm using just his cockroaches. This makes Uro really susceptible to Bang, which would be a hard ability for her to counter due to its invisible nature. Ryu could probably put up a decent fight if he doesn't get intimidated like he did against Sukuna. Granite Blast is really strong and it would likely do damage to Makima if it hits, but if she uses the Future Devil, she should have no issue dodging and countering the blasts. Bang is probably the most effective ability to use here as well, but Ryu is surprisingly tanky, so it's really hard to say. Next we have Chozo. Chozo is like Kamo on steroids. Not only is he a much better fighter in almost every way, but his capacity to use blood manipulation is also much higher because he doesn't have to worry about blood loss. Additionally, his blood is poisonous, so Chozo might be even more effective at inhibiting Makima's fighting capabilities than Kamo was, depending on how the poison works. He's also able to integrate other depths painting techniques into his own arsenal, so he is a very versatile fighter. All of this leads me to believe that Makima would have to use some kind of ability to beat Chozo. Bang would probably be somewhat effective against him depending on where it hits, and she could probably also just beat him in hand-to-hand combat until he's incapacitated like Kenjaku did, and then finish him off from there. Next is Chozo's brother Yuji. Some of you are probably surprised or disappointed to see Yuji in just mid-tier, but honestly, I think it's a miracle he's even this high up. Yuji is a strong sorcerer, there's no doubt about that, but he's just not built to fight a character like Makima. So much of his strength comes in his ability to take hits and hit hard, and while this works in a lot of cases, he really lacks destructive capabilities that could force Makima to take the fight more seriously. Sure, he has Shrine, but the Yuji we see doesn't really use Shrine in a destructive way, so it doesn't really count here. Without more destructive potential, Makima won't use more abilities or contracts. She doesn't need much to beat Yuji because Yuji does not have a lot to throw at her. Even his domain expansion isn't all that effective since it's just a weaker shrine that touches the soul, and souls have no correlation to power in Chainsaw Man. I think this fight would be similar to Makima versus weakened Pochita, meaning they would fist fight until Makima takes the win. Next is Yorozu. I'll be honest, she's only here for Perfect Sphere. This is an ability that could theoretically threaten almost anyone, as its infinite pressure means it should destroy any part of its target that it touches, including parts of Makima. That is, assuming Yorozu gets to use it in the first place. The problem for her comes from her durability. While she is a strong fighter, it's clear she cannot take strong attacks that well, as Max Elephant had no problem destroying even her most advanced armor. This leads me to believe that a stronger weapon from Angel would be enough to end her with little effort. If she opens her domain or uses Perfect Sphere, things get a bit tougher, but as we've covered before, Bang is a great counter to domain expansions in general. Plus, even if Makima does get destroyed by Perfect Sphere, she should still come back due to her contract with the Prime Minister, according to Kishibe. Even if Yorozu does summon Perfect Sphere, Makima would probably be able to identify what it is, as she is highly intelligent, and therefore will never let herself be hit by the attack. Unfortunately, she will have a much harder time dodging the attacks of our next sorcerer, which is Naobito. Naobito is the second strongest sorcerer of the modern era behind only Gojo. His speed comes from the projection sorcery technique, which also provides him with some pretty good offensive abilities, as he's able to trap opponents in paper unless they're able to move at 24 frames per second. This means Makima would likely get turned into her key visuals over and over again. Now, I don't think this means Naobito can really beat Makima. We saw Jogo outmaneuver Naobito pretty easily, so I don't think Makima would be too far behind him in terms of speed. I think she could take advantage of the fact that he has to abide by the laws of physics while at high speeds, and then use that to predict where he's going to go and then put a devil or hybrid in his path to deal with him. I think he'd probably use Katana Man in this situation, as he is also quite fast. Next is Hakari. Hakari is pretty straightforward. If Makima gets an edge before Hakari opens his domain, she will win, as he will not have automatic reverse curse technique. This is a pretty big if, especially if Hakari procs his domain before entering the fight, in which case things get much more interesting. Makima will be unable to kill Hakari while his domain is active, but he will be unable to kill her due to her Prime Minister contract. It's really just two unkillable beings going at it until something changes, and Hakari is far more likely to change than Makima. Really, all Makima has to do is wait until Hakari misses the roll and does not gain automatic reverse curse technique. This is very unlikely due to his hidden probability factor factor, but it's not impossible, and Makima really has no time constraints like he does. Another potential path to victory for Makima could be using Bang directly on his skull. The reason I say this is a potential path to victory rather than a guaranteed one is because Hikari lived a direct electrical attack to his head from Kashimo, so there is a decent chance Hikari can somehow live a headbang as well, although I am curious if he would live if the bang destroyed his entire head. Regardless, Makima wins on time here, so let's move on to our next sorcerer, which is Geto. Geto's curse manipulation technique is one of the most versatile in the show, giving him access to thousands of cursed spirits, including a number of strong ones. The issue? It still probably wouldn't be enough to actually beat Makima. I think he would definitely give her some trouble, as he can overwhelm her with sheer numbers, but those numbers aren't actually going to be all that effective when put up against her healing abilities or the weapons she can create from Angel. Additionally, Geto does not have any healing capabilities of his own, meaning any damage he sustains will be permanent, and he doesn't have a domain either, which just puts him even further back. Another character in this tier is Mekamaru. Mekamaru is really only here because of his absolute mode, which provides him with protection from many of Makima's attacks and also gives him huge fire power. The issue with Mekamaru is similar to the issue with Hikari. Absolute mode is on a timer, a very long timer, but a timer nonetheless. Therefore, Makima just has to fight back and force Mekamaru into using his stored cursed energy until he runs out. If she doesn't want to wait though, I think bringing Reze into the fight could make it go a lot faster, as her explosions should be decent at damaging the mech. This is another fairly easy win for Makima, so let's move on to our final medium difficulty sorcerer, Uraume. I will always glaze Uraume as much as possible because I love people with ice-based abilities, but even with maximum glaze, Makima does not struggle too much against them. Uraume, like pretty much every sorcerer we've talked about so far, doesn't have a great way to kill Makima, but I do think Uraume could slow Makima down thanks to her ability to freeze people. She was able to completely freeze Maki for a decent amount of time, so I think she should be able to do the same to Makima as well. Add to this the high degree of control they have over their ice and their insane RCT, and I think Uraume could hold her own against Makima as long as she doesn't take a bang early on. The quickest path to victory for Makima here would be to use the Bomb Devil once again, as it would be very effective at destroying the ice Uraume creates, acting as a fairly effective counter to the sorcerer. And with that, we enter high tier. These are the sorcerers that I think Makima would actually have to try to win against. And when I say that, I mean she has to put in the same amount of effort as she did against Chainsaw Man in order to guarantee a victory. She can still probably win without using all of her tools, but it is a lot harder, and I think she would resort to using them. First up is Takeba. Takeba could 1000% beat Makima if he wanted to kill her. The biggest thing holding Takeba back is himself, and if he could allow himself to kill with his ability, or had any idea how his ability worked at all, he could beat Makima with no issue. His ability to bend reality with Comedian would likely scare Makima into trying, and while I don't think she would be able to beat him with brute force, we do see that he can be beaten if his opponent makes him lose confidence in his comedy capabilities. The issue here though is Makima doesn't exactly seem like the kind of person who's into comedy in the same way Kenjaku was, so she might have a harder time with this, or her lack of knowledge could act to her aid, since it could lead to less jokes landing, which could inadvertently hurt Takeba's confidence in himself. There is also a possibility that Takeba's reality bending abilities could interfere with Makima's contracts, disabling her ability to control other devils or get rid of her healing capabilities for some time. But even in this case, I don't think she would be in too much trouble, since, once again, Takeba doesn't think people dying is funny. So unless Takeba changes his sense of humor, he cannot win, but there's also a chance Makima cannot win either. So this matchup sits here in high tier. Next is Yuki. Yuki is really interesting because of her black hole. Here's what makes this interesting. If she uses the black hole and Makima gets sucked in and spaghettified, she should come back to life, but only after the spaghettification is done. The question is, does spaghettification stop to outside observers, or does it continue forever because of the time dilation? I am not an expert at physics at all, so I might be completely misunderstanding this phenomena, but I'm pretty sure it means that if Makima gets caught in Yuki's black hole, it could take forever for her to die, or at least to outside observers. This means if Yuki uses her black hole, she could force a tie in a way. Since Makima wouldn't reincarnate, she would just be stuck in a black hole forever. That being said, if she doesn't use her black hole, she will lose. She does not stand a chance at all against Makima in single combat, but being able to force a tie against her is still quite a feat, which is why she's in high tier. While we're on the subject of the special grades, we might as well talk about Yuta as well. Yuta is mainly up here because I think he would force Makima to use the hybrids. Being in a 2v1 like Yuta forces would put Makima at a disadvantage automatically, and the strength of Rika alone pushes this even further. Yuta's ability Copy also gives him a huge amount of versatility as well, putting him on equal footing in terms of abilities that he has access to. Now obviously, some of these are more useful than others. Shrine would provide him with a great slashing attack, slowing down Makima as she has to heal fairly consistently. Sky Manipulation could be useful as well in disrupting her attacks and potentially redirecting some as well. Even Cursed Speech could be useful here against some of the hybrids and potentially Makima if he was smart with his words. But then there are abilities like Body Hopping, which provide zero advantage in this case since it's a one-on-one, or Jacob's Ladder, which is also useless because its effects only apply to curse techniques, which Makima obviously doesn't have. Regardless of these small issues, I think Yuta could be able to overwhelm Makima with force in the short term, but if she calls on the 7-weapon hybrids and turns this 2v1 into an 8v2, he's not gonna do too well. I think Yuta is probably strong enough to beat all the weapon devils individually, aside from maybe Quan Chi, since she is just kinda that bitch. But this isn't Yuta versus each weapon individually, it's all of them and Makima at once. Even if Rika could take a couple out or separate some from him to lighten the load, I still think it would be too much for him and Rika in the long run. They could probably do well in the short term, but remember, they can only stay fully connected for 5 minutes. And after that, Yuta loses access to his copy techniques unless he opens his domain. In his domain, he would have a bit of an advantage, but the swords would actually produce a huge risk, since he has to use a technique from a sword before he can discard it for another, meaning he would have to waste cursed energy if he got a Jacob's Ladder sword or a body hopping sword. In fact, getting a body hopping sword in his domain might just be GG, because he would have no bodies to hop to and therefore couldn't use the sword. So overall, I think Yuta could pose enough of a threat to Makima to force her to use the hybrids, but once she does, it's probably just over for him. Next is Heian Sukuna. Before you get mad, this is not the last time we're covering Sukuna. Don't worry, he will come up one more time in the final tier in a final form. This form of Sukuna though would probably not be able to take down Makima. He just doesn't have a way to deal with her healing capabilities. No matter how many times she gets dismembered or burnt to a crisp, she'll be fine a few seconds or minutes later. That being said, it is still Sukuna, right? The dude that took like 8 black flashes, 2 Jacob's Ladders, and who knows how many other strong attacks, so he's not gonna go down easily. If Sukuna is anything, he's tanky, which is why he's in this tier. I don't know if Makima would be able to beat him in the traditional sense without using every single card she has in her deck. Bang would of course be useful here, as it could do some serious damage to Sukuna's body, forcing him to waste cursed energy healing. Bringing in Quan Chi, Barim, or Reze could also prove useful to keep him occupied, allowing Makima to observe and learn more about him. If she uses both of these strategies and also summons a strong weapon from Angel, I really don't think there's a realistic way for Sukuna to survive. Yes, it would still take a long time to kill him, but I think he would lose eventually, just like he did in Jujutsu Kaisen. Next is Sukuna's BFF, Kenjaku. This dude is just like Geto but stronger, so I don't want to spend too much time on him here. The main advantage Kenjaku has over Geto is that he has 1,000 years of battle experience, if not more. That's a lot of time, allowing him to gain a lot of expertise as we see throughout the series. This expertise is the main reason I'm putting him in high tier. He could definitely do some damage to Makima, but like all the other sorcerers in this tier, I don't think it would be enough to actually kill her. And the final character we have in the high tier is Mahoraga. I want to cover this dude individually because he's just so interesting. Mahoraga has the ability to adapt to any and all phenomena. That is what makes him one of the strongest beings in Jujutsu Kaisen, and is also why I think he probably has a good shot at beating Makima. His adaptations should, by definition, be able to adapt to Makima's contract with the Prime Minister of Japan, meaning he has an opportunity to kill her for good. But I don't think that means Mahoraga would automatically win. See, the more powerful or complex a technique is, the longer Mahoraga's adaptations take to develop a counter. We saw this when it took him 5 rotations to conquer Infinite Void and 4 to bypass Infinity. Makima's Prime Minister contract would probably take at least 3 turns of the wheel in my opinion, which means she does have some time to counterattack and try to figure out what he's doing, which I think she could do. With so many tools at her disposal, she could test some of the less important and less powerful contracts against the beast in order to gain an understanding for what it's doing, which would allow her to come to the same conclusion as Gojo. This Shikigami must be defeated in one hit. Would she be able to do it? I think so, as long as she doesn't let Mahoraga adapt to Angel. If she can fight Mahoraga without using one of Angel's weapons, I think a strong Angel weapon, like 1,000 years of usage or more, could probably one-shot Mahoraga. There are a number of factors that have to go right for this to work, but I don't think it's impossible. Another potential path to victory is that squashing ability we saw her use. If she can land this, it should kill Mahoraga, since it pulverized everyone else into mist with no issue. The problem is the amount of conditions required to get this ability to work. Not only does she need to know Mahoraga's full name, which is 8-handed Sword Divergent Scylla Divine General Mahoraga, what a mouthful, she also has to get someone else to say it and then do the hand motion to actually kill the Shikigami. Much like the first option, I don't think this is impossible either, but I do think it's a bit unlikely. Regardless, Mahoraga is the last character that I think Makima has a decent chance at beating, meaning it's time to move on to the final tier. The wow, even with Glaze this is hard tier. This tier only has 3 people: Gojo, Megumi Sukuna, and, surprisingly, Higuruma. Let's start with the obvious match, the classic, the one I talked about 2 weeks ago, the one everyone's talked about 1,000 times, Gojo vs Makima. Gojo vs Makima is one of those matchups that people will probably always discuss in some capacity, because it is very much 2 immovable objects coming in contact with each other. Makima cannot hurt Gojo through infinity, but Gojo probably can't kill Makima either because of her contract with the Prime Minister. He would have to kill her 100 million times before she would actually die. Which, I mean, it's Gojo, so it might not be completely impossible, but he is also one of the people wrapped up in the contract, so he might just kill himself inadvertently in the process. Gojo could potentially prevent Makima from healing if he grabs her head and then teleports it away from the rest of her body as it's healing. But even then, we've seen headless bodies function in Chainsaw Man, so I'm not sure it would be a solution that would kill her. Infinite Void probably wouldn't work either, because in the long run, it wears off over time, and also puts Gojo in burnout, meaning he cannot use his other techniques afterwards. I guess he could dismember her while they're in her domain and she's incapacitated, and then give her the Denji treatment by putting her in a ton of different boxes. This wouldn't kill her, but it would stop her from healing. So because of this option, I think Gojo wins like 51% of the time. It's really a toss-up between these two, and it's an even closer toss-up between Makima and Meguna. This entire fight basically comes down to Mahoraga, except it's a bit harder for Makima because she also has to deal with Sukuna, his domain, and the rest of the 10 shadows as well. I don't think these things would really make that much of a difference, but they are additional factors that could distract Makima or make her more desperate, forcing her to use more contracts that Mahoraga could adapt to, and potentially give Sukuna adaptations to as well. This is a matchup I think Makima would have a very hard time winning, but again, I don't think it's impossible. If she can kill Mahoraga, Sukuna really has no way to beat her even with the 10 shadows technique, so she should win if, and that is a big if, she can kill the beast, but maybe she can't. And lastly, we have Higuruma. Higuruma is only here for the Executioner's Blade. Normally, I wouldn't consider abilities like the Executioner's Blade that kill opponents 100% of the time to be effective against Makima, but it's stated in Jujutsu Kaisen that there are no exceptions with the Executioner's Blade, and it always kills the person it cuts. To me, this means it could bypass Makima's healing abilities and kill her outright, meaning Higuruma is the only character to have a guaranteed way to kill Makima. This alone makes him a threat, but what increases his threat level even higher is the lack of information Makima has on the blade. Without knowing what it does, there's a good chance she would allow herself to be cut by it to see what it does, and that's all it would take to kill her. This broken ability does of course come with a condition though, as Higuruma would have to get Makima convicted of the death penalty before it can activate, and unless Makima is secretly controlling the government to make all of her actions legal, I think she's gonna get some charges here. So this condition likely won't be a large barrier either. Get it? Barrier, because it takes place in his domain. That being said, if Higuruma is not able to secure the death penalty for whatever reason, he probably just loses. Like, outright. Not even a confiscation would be able to save him, since Makima has no cursed energy or cursed techniques to confiscate. So getting the death penalty is really the only option here, and without it, he's on the back foot and has very little chance of winning. At least, in my opinion. Let me know what your opinions are on this topic in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week for another video.